Hi, everybody. This is Chief Alcanaper. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, we're going to have a little bit of a special kind of call. We've been talking about emotions for the past several weeks, and we'll get back to that and adjective mapping on Thursday. But I wanted to bring up a different subject. Today is election day. Regardless of who wins the election, about half the population is going to be very unhappy with whatever the result may be. And so that sets into motion a whole um, chain of events that actually leads to great opportunity for all of us in the human development industry to be of service. Now, whether that service translates into billable hours or whether it's just something we're doing to help our fellow humans get back to some semblance of normal, that whatever it is, but we have an opportunity and we need to get prepared for whatever that is. So you should be seeing the screen right now. I imagine, am I sharing the screen? You see a little
Yes.
Word document, rebuilding relationships.
Yeah.
Um, this is what I really would like the topic to be, our little focus, and I'll show you how that merges with the new feature on the ChangeWorks software and go from there. Okay, so here's my basic thought coming into this. For many months now, and for a good period of time to follow, there is ick that exists between people and their friends, and people and their family members, people and their neighbors, people and their colleagues. And it's all based on who had what kind of political leanings and what their reasons were for all that, and where people were in alignment with one another, where they were in great opposition with one another. And so I think that relationships have taken a very big hit. And while the situation is what it is, the truth, the bottom line truth is that whatever's going on politically is temporary. And whether we measure temporary in weeks, months, years, or decades, it's temporary, where the relationships that we have with people, at least good ones, shouldn't be something that we consider to be temporary, but really more permanent. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to reach out to those with whom we may have had some disconnect and get ready to reconnect with them. So are you guys on the same page with me there? Are we kind of seeing the same thing or expecting the same dynamic will be happening? Yes.
Yes, I appreciate this session today, T. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, so politics is ever changing. Our best relationship should be everlasting. And anything we can do to help that happen, we want to have that help. And so I thought I'd take you through a little bit of a little outline I put together about the whole idea about rebuilding relationships. And then I want to move this onto the new feature on the change grid and show you how we'd like to incorporate this in our work in the next week or so. So to begin with, let's just create a little scenario. And in this scenario, you, for whatever reasons, have found yourself at odds with a family member, a friend, coworker, colleague, neighbor, whatever it happens to be, but you're at odds. And you go like, well, you know, even though we might feel very differently about whatever's going on, the truth is that I still like this person a whole lot and I'd like them to be in my life. And we may need to do some work, therefore, to rebuild the relationship, to get past whatever the ick happens to be and get back to being the good friends that we've always been. So can you guys all come up with a scenario to use as a little bit of an example as we work our way through this? Yeah, y'all got something in mind?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So here's my thought. I think, well, before we do anything, we really need to get some clarity around these first few questions. So the first one is, who exactly are you trying to? And by the way, I pulled this from another document we put together years and years ago about influencing. So who are you trying to influence? Well, that's not what it is, right? Who are you trying to heal with? Who are you trying to mend fences? Who are you trying to plug in whatever metaphor you really want? But who who specifically is it? Because this isn't a one size fits all an approach or a discussion. It's going to be unique to each relationship. It's unique to the individuals that are involved. So who specifically are you trying to work with, mend, whatever? We got to get clarity around that. The second thing is we have to get some clarity around what is it that we're actually hoping to walk away with. So what does mending the fence mean? Does that just mean that we can all sit at the Thanksgiving table together and have a meal without it becoming an argument? Or does that mean we can get back to being best buddies? I don't know, but what is it that you're hoping to walk away with? Is it returning to things as they always were? Is it a new negotiated sort of a relationship? Is it what? What is it that you're hoping to accomplish in the early stages of this relationship rebuilding sort of a process? The third question is, why are you doing it? Now, I put something up on my Facebook page yesterday that was at least 90% an experiment and 10% something that I really wanted to do anyway. I simply put up a little message that said that my relationships with my friends, my neighbors, and my colleagues are more important to me than whatever political beliefs they hold. And that's what I put up. And that's all I said. And I was very curious to know what kind of responses am I going to get to this? And I got quite the wide range of responses, let me tell you. The majority of people were saying like they agree completely, that it really is the relationships are what needs to matter, etc. But I got a few very interesting responses from people who actually wanted to hold their friends and family members and colleagues and coworkers guilty for whatever the elements of disagreement that they have with whoever the political leader happens to be. And so just because someone chooses to support a particular candidate does not mean that that person is in 100% agreement with everything that that candidate said or did or believes or whatever. Everyone's got their own different kind of equation going into it. But there was a certain set of respondents who basically indicated that if you agree with X, therefore we can no longer have any sort of relationship whatsoever, or at least for a period of time, I can't be near you, with you, etc. That to me felt a little bit extreme. That's certainly not how my heart works, but there were some people who actually were of that belief.
E,
Yes.
were you surprised at the people who expressed that feeling? I mean, were they people you knew and were you
Hmm.
surprised?
Well, they were people that I knew, and the one that in particular kind of surprised me for a couple of reasons. First of all, I understood why he was feeling so I don't want to say upgrade, we'll just use our own language, upgrade about the situation, because he is a gay man, a person of color, someone who has been very much discriminated against, very much bullied, and all those sorts of things. So his life experiences were ones that were already, what I want to say, upgrade. We'll just use our language, upgrade, and the situation has made it even more upgrade. So he frames himself as being a victim, and at least I want to say a targeted victim, and doesn't want to in any way associate with anyone who would victimize him or support the behaviors of someone who is victimizing him. So that part didn't surprise me. What did surprise me is that he's a clinical psychologist who works with populations in conflict resolution.
Mm.
So that part was kind of surprising because I thought, well, I know his life experiences, but you would like to think that his professional background and all of his experiences would help him to detach a bit more. But nevertheless, his experience is his experience. I can understand it. I can respect it. I can honor it. But that doesn't mean I have complete understanding of it. And that's okay, which is what we're getting into. And then there are some people who said, and it wasn't someone who responded to my posting directly, but my post got shared a bunch of times. And so I was curious. I went and clicked on who shared it and what kind of play they were getting off of it. And one of the persons said that they believed that in this past X amount of time, that they were able to see the true colors of their friends and family members and colleagues and coworkers, and that that will change things forever. And I thought, wowza. So, I kind of get it. There's a whole range of responses that people are having based on a whole range of interactions they've had with their friends, family members, colleagues, coworkers, whatever the relationship happens to be. And I can get it that sometimes this gets to the why are you mending? Well, is it possible that the answer may very well be with full awareness, I'm choosing not to mend. I'm choosing to let this be a time of parting ways. And so I wanted to put that out there just to say that I don't think that any of us um, are obligated to support the belief that all relationships must be healed. Maybe, just maybe, it's true that this is one of those proverbial straws that breaks the camel's back, or this is that final insight that lets you just kind of know that what once was there isn't there anymore. And that's okay. People grow, they grow together, they move apart. And so that could be okay as well. And then this last one that I put here was, when is the right time? So we may not know the actual results for several days, if not weeks, but sooner or later we're going to know, well, when's the right time to let the healing begin? When's the right time to put any energy into reaching out to someone to mend those fences, etc. So I thought someone, before they start trying to do much of anything, needs to stop for a moment and just go, who, what, why, and when. And once they get some clarity around who, what, why, and when, well, now we can start talking about the how. And the how is what we are really all about. I mean, we're human development professionals. We're trying to help people to achieve whatever outcomes they are hoping to pursue. So we're all about the how. But before people just jump in there and start howing and acting, maybe they really do need to get clarity around who and what and why and when is the elements around there. Thoughts, comments? A lot of you are unmuted. I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts about the whole idea about who, what, why, when.
This is Kathy. I'll just comment briefly. I mean, I think that there are going to be situations where relationships can't be healed, largely because the other person just may not be willing. I don't have many of those. I mean, I have a couple of, just maybe one relationship that I'm concerned about, but I see it all around me. So yes, I mean, I think that what you're saying is we have to be realistic. I don't want to be, I don't know if I can maintain a relationship with somebody who insists on coloring it that way, of making it that black and white. And I would just want to stay away from that kind of energy. But apart from that, what you're saying in the process seems to work for me.
Yeah. Okay. Other thoughts?
I actually have a different perspective because most of my friends and families are like myself. They're immigrants, and some have come to the United States, and like myself, have participated for the first time in the election. But I have difficulty with, like what Kathy was just expressing, those who presume that you have to have a certain way of thinking about it. Because for me, I'm Mr. Positive, right? That's one of my so-called strengths. And when I'm talking to people here in the Washington, D.C. area, and they ask automatically, as immigrant, what do you think? And I say, well, why does it matter? What do I think? You know, so they're almost like the trying to draw you into this dialogue, and I can see it coming, and so I just avoid it. But that's not my temperament. My temperament is I have a deep compassion for humanity. You know, I think about all the places I live, and so I almost don't even want to talk to people, because it gets to that point where somewhere in the conversation it seems as if that's the thing to do here, is to have a political side. And so for me, I try to just stay away from it, but that's not my temperament. So I feel uncomfortable here. I'm at the point now where it's like, I'm ready to leave this area.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
I like
when you
it.
say, Brian, leave the area, you mean leave DC?
Yes.
He's in the belly of the beast.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Well, and you know, I mean,
I can sense that tension here, like literally. You know, I lived in so many different places that I had to learn very early how to pick up intangible aspects of tension. So it's not just words that are spoke, but it's looks, is that's kind of thing, and I can pick up on that quite easily. And it's very prevalent here for me. So it's uncomfortable because I don't know who to speak to, who not, or who to speak to, or where. I don't want to be a part of any kind of circles, and that's not me. So I don't feel like this is the place for me.
Yeah.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing I'd like to share with you, Brian, is that because you have self-identified as an immigrant, and this is a new experience for you dealing with this whole political sort of situation, what you may not be aware of is that pretty much, I'm looking at the list of who's on the call, all of us were raised in fundamentally the same way. And that was that there were at least 3 topics that polite conversation never included. And those 3 topics were, everybody want to rattle them off?
Politics,
Money,
religion, and sex.
Yeah, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about money, but sex is an interesting one there, Tom.
In the right company at the right time,
Yeah,
but we need to be careful.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you don't talk about these things. They are simply considered to be subjects that polite society does not introduce into any kind of conversation. And the other thing is that when I went through my civics classes in school, I was raised and taught that your political beliefs are yours, and they are not to be shared with others. They are a private matter. And so the thought that anyone would even ask someone else who they voted for, that was kind of like foreign. It's kind of like, no, this is private and everyone should be keeping it all private. Well, somewhere along the line, we forgot that the subject matter was not something that fits into polite conversation, and that the whole privacy issue seems to have been tossed aside. And
Well,
so,
social media was a big part of that.
absolutely,
Is that people got the courage to do that, and then they got tribal, and then they got cancel culture.
right.
It's a mess.
Yeah, and so this is the whole thing. So I think that what you're experiencing is unique, and it's even unique for all of us who have been here for a good long while, doing this for a long time. But just know, they do say time heals all wounds. Maybe it heals the vast majority of them, but there's some lingering. And I forget who was talking about the other party that's involved in these. They also have to be willing and interested in mending the fence. So there's always going to be people who aren't letting go and aren't ever going to let go, regardless of what the outcome is going to be. Okay. Other thoughts before I kind of move deeper into the little outline I put together here?
The thing I was going to say about that, T, is that it seems to me that people who are forcing the issue or just can't let it go are people with deep insecurities. And I'm sure everyone here, or at least I would believe everyone here, has had those people in their lives and probably does their best to try and weed that segment out. But I think the who, what, why, when is an excellent approach to it.
Yeah, because then we can kind of decide, if we are, when we are, what we are. willing to do, going to do, etc. I think that's vitally important. Now, to build on what David just said there, I'm just looking for the layer I really want to be showing. It's this one. So when we talk about that, sometimes people have difficulty letting go. They kind of get stuck on that. We talk about where is someone more likely to be open versus closed, workable versus non-workable, rigid versus flexible. Let's just talk a little bit about the locations on the change grid and see if we can get some sort of pattern. So if I said, where on the change grid would you expect to find someone who is going to be most open / least closed?
In the center, I would think.
Yeah, are we all in agreement on that, in the center?
Yes.
Yeah. And so as we move away from the center in any direction, what happens to openness? What happens to flexibility?
It narrows.
Decreases.
It's going to narrow. It's going to decrease. And so as I move from being at the center of the change grid further and further out grid, should I be surprised to find out that people are going to become more rigid in whatever their position happens to be? And again, it doesn't have anything specifically about politics. It's just about behavior in general. As someone moves further and further out grid, what happens to their conviction, to their flexibility, to their openness? Tell me what happens.
I'm stronger.
They become stronger, more locked in, et cetera, et cetera. And again, if we apply those 4 ways that people deal with life and death situations, this is where the fight lives. And so their rigidity, their whatever word you want to use to describe what's happening that far out grid, in that 3rd degree imbalance, that's what the actual labeling here means. 3rd degree imbalance could manifest itself in fight. Thoughts about that? Anyone want to demonstrate that and tell me a story, or why is that someone who's outgrid 3rd degree imbalance might fight?
Well, they've got to defend something.
Mhm.
And it seems to me that the further outgrid you go, the more you're going to dig in.
Yep. And if you think about it, just look at these 2 dimensions. They believe the level of challenge is very high, which means someone could be challenging them. So maybe that's where the perceived challenge is coming from. Someone outside of them is challenging whatever they're thinking, but they view their ability as being very high. And so this is a battle that they think they can win. And they probably frame it in those kinds of terms. So they're ready to fight, and they believe they'll prevail. Now, if I go back to the center, I'm nice, balanced, flexible, open, and I start to move further and further up grid. Well, I'm still going to reach an area of 3rd degree imbalance. I'm still going to find a heightened level of rigidity, higher levels of focus. Why? Why is that happening?
That's where fear is. That's where they're expressing fear. I think to the greatest extent, or feeling fear to the greatest.
And so what do they perceive their range of options to be that far up grid?
Very
Yeah.
narrow.
Very narrow.
Very narrow, like little, if any, real options. So they're grabbing hold of whatever life ring they feel has been tossed their way, and they're going to hang on to it with, every last shred of energy they have. And so, they're rigid, but that's a very different rigidity than outgrid.
Yeah.
Okay, and so they're not going to be all that flexible. Now, it seems counterintuitive, but the same pattern holds true down grid and in grid. So go back to the center, you're feeling nice, open, flexible, whatever, but move yourself further and further down grid. And as you move further and further down grid, you become increasingly rigid. But the rigidity that we find deep down in apathy could be felt, experienced, displayed differently than the rigidity outgrid or upgrid. So tell me about the rigidity of someone who's deep down in apathy.
So would you call that aloof?
Aloof, but you gotta take it to aloof squared, aloof to the 3rd power.
It feels like compliance, but it's usually withdraw. In
Yeah.
other words, it's like when you go, whatever, but you're not really agreeing. You just aren't going to fight.
Well, they don't want to change at all.
Because what lives down grid? You remember what lives
Well,
down grid?
complacency, apathy. I mean,
Yeah, mastery lives down grid as well,
Right.
because their ability is extremely high. The challenge is very low. So now the mindset of the person who's down that far down grid is kind of like this. There is no threat here, people.
We don't
There's
need,
nothing to be focusing on. There's nothing to be worried about. Everything is just fine. Now they could be delusional, but that's where their
But
mind
if they're
is.
delusional, then it would be, I'm right, I know I'm right, so there's no need to discuss it. And that's
Exactly.
really withdraw,
And that's right. And that's the rigidity. And so
disengagement.
in the 4Fs, that's where freeze is, because they simply make no action, no movement, no nothing. They just stay right where they are, complacent, ambivalent, but again, holding the belief and holding it firmly that
Yeah.
they have absolutely mastered this situation. There is no problem. There is no threat. Everything is absolutely fine. And so as a result, they do nothing. Now, I will tell you that if you confront them and try to argue with them, don't be surprised to find them move out grid, because they still have that level of ability. They didn't want to fight, but okay, fine. If you want to get into a battle with them and have them prove their point, you'd better be ready. Now, of course, their logic might be outdated, or the facts that they're using might be very old or whatever. Nevertheless, they feel that they've got everything they need. So don't be surprised to see a downgrid individual when challenged moving more outgrid. Okay, and so that leaves us with this rigidity that comes from being very far in-grid. I know one of you guys used the word withdrawn. Well, the person who's on the in-grid side of thing uses fading into the background as their coping mechanism in a life or death kind of a situation. So I kind of think there's a difference between being withdrawn and what the people downgrid are. Is like they're not so much withdrawn as much as they are we need a better adjective than withdrawn, because withdrawn implies that I see there's an issue and I'm moving away from it. Where these people just kind of go like, there is no issue. They've got their head in the sand. So is that withdrawn, or is that just non-participative? Is that,
detached?
what's that?
no,
Detached?
Detached?
Yeah, okay.
no.
I shared with you guys one of my favorite game shows ever, no longer on TV, but it was called Oblivious. It was the game show you didn't know you were on.
huh,
So yeah, there was like a quiz show, and someone had a little speaker in their ear, a little earpiece, and someone elsewhere was feeding them trivia questions that they needed to just ask this person that was in front of them. And every time they could get this person to answer one of the trivia questions and get the answer right, they won money. But they couldn't let the person know this was going on, and so the person who was answering the questions was actually quite oblivious to the fact that they were on a game show and they were making money. And so I just absolutely love the premise. They're just plain oblivious. And so I kind of think that withdrawn to me feels more like a conscious action is happening of some sort, where what's happening downgrid might be where you end up after long periods of being withdrawn. So thoughts
Well,
about
when
Like
that?
you
I
have
used
a
the word
blind
withdraw,
spot?
I meant it in terms of like on negotiation styles, how it would
Yeah.
sound was like, I'm so right, it's not even worth bothering arguing with you.
Okay, good. And so,
So
all right,
that's withdraw from the conversation, because the
right.
conversation might shine a light on something and raise my tension. And
Hmm.
I'm just happy, like the pig in the blanket being just there. But
Yeah.
withdraw means not engaging in anything
Right.
that might change my rightness.
Okay, well, I like that definition then because that definitely applies down there. They just feel like there's no reason to participate. that it's kind of a waste of everyone's breath. It's like, it's a done deal, everybody. Why are we having this conversation? That's the downgrade kind of thing. Where I think the person who is in grid really does want to physically retreat, physically withdraw, physically avoid
Yeah.
whatever's going on by disappearing into what's going on. Again, they don't think they have any ability, but as long as they can protect their little environment, or want to say insulate themselves from what's going on, they also don't have to deal with any challenge. So this is, that kind of avoid. So I can see there where they become uh, rigid as well, because any movement could represent a movement into danger. And so it's better to just retreat, just disappear into the background. Don't participate. We are not the droids you seek. So that kind of thing. Becoming invisible is their superpower. Okay. So I think that's interesting that I go, well, if I'm going to encounter any individual, and getting back to the actual subject matter of the current time period, I'm probably going to encounter a lot of people in the foreseeable future that are going to be extremely upgrid, and there's going to be a whole bunch that are extremely outgrid, and maybe a bunch of people that are downgrid. But I don't think that the downgrid people are the relationship issues I need to heal, because they didn't care, they never cared, they don't care. So what's the issue? And the in-grid people really would just be happy for the subject to change and move on to whatever else. But so I think we're going to find a lot of upgrade energy and a lot of outgrade energy and everything that happens along that continuum. I do think if you annoy a downgrade person enough, they're going to get more engaged. And I can show you that layer of the change grid if you want to see. You take them downgrade, you start to annoy them, they move up grid. Now they're aware, now they're in tension. You got them into some dynamic kind of change. But I think it's really more about those than about anything on the in-grid side of things. Okay, so why did I bother bringing that up? I brought it up just to answer, getting back to that why question, or when is the right time? If they are in one of those danger zones, do you think that's the time to be putting forth effort to begin the healing process, the mending process?
No.
No, I don't think it can get through at that point.
At that point,
Yeah.
And so we got to let time do what time can do. We got to let the dust settle. We do know the natural movement on the change grid is down-grid. So over the course of the period of time, even the most upset individual is likely to move down-grid. Because what's the chances of their greatest fears actually all coming true? So they might actually realize, well, it's not as awful. Remember, we say the people that are too far up grid awfulize situations.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
awfulize is made out of two words. What are the two words awful lies are made out of?
Awful and lies.
Awful and lies. So you've been telling yourselves all these really, really awful lies. And so you're going to discover the truth, and you'll mellow out, you'll move down grid. Well, then it becomes workable. So getting back to my little grid, when I go like, well, when's the right time to be working with someone? It really is when they are at least at second degree imbalance. There is a workability that exists at second degree imbalance. And certainly the people that are in first degree imbalance are the ones that you could actually have the best conversations with. You might learn something, they might learn something, you can all share. That center of the change grid has plenty of respect going for it. Everyone's got enough confidence to feel safe in opening up and sharing what's going on. And so this is where good dialogue occurs. And so wouldn't it be great if we could all just be inside of this green circle and say, well, we may have different viewpoints, different whatevers, we're all in a spot that's not only workable, but is working. So this is where normal life is lived. We're never all going to be the same. We're always going to have our own little uniqueness. And so that's great. You get out to second degree. Now we might need to have some work to do. That would involve one of us in our roles as a human development professional, or a facilitator, or a counselor, or someone who just is trying to actively help others to heal, to help relationships to mend. So I think this is where our work opportunity is. about that. So, all right, I'll be quiet for a few moments and just say, what are your guys' thoughts about this idea of third degree, second degree, first degree imbalance, and how that might come into play when you decide who and when to start the work?
You know,
Thoughts?
with all the coaching that I've done over the years, I have to tell you, I had kind of an epiphany when you were talking about that once you get outside a second degree imbalance, coaching is no longer really an option.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us more about that.
Well, I think that, you need counseling at that point.
Yeah, some other form of intervention
Not
that
coaching.
may be beyond the scope of whatever our licenses or our services or even what we feel like getting involved with
Yeah. I
if
mean,
we do have them.
I've been into those situations many times, and I have to tell you, I felt good every time I turned one down.
Yep, yep. And so, yeah, we all have to be careful what we invite into our reality. And that gets back to this question about why am I trying to rebuild this relationship? Is this a good time to just say we're too different, we need to move on, or am I at least going in with my eyes wide open about what's going on? So we need to get these four. Okay, so I think we could spend the rest of our time talking about these four little elements. But I think if someone reaches out to you and says, you know, I had a lot of really bad arguments with family members as all this was getting to where it is today. They're my family. I got to do that. I would hope that you guys would lead them through a little bit of an exploration of who, what, why, and when before you get into giving them advice about how to do whatever strategies and processes and procedures. We got to get some clarity around who, what, why, and when. Thoughts? Agreement?
Yes. You
Yes.
know what's difficult for me is I tend to think about things from, I call it a net value perspective. And net value isn't a popular decision. It's the thing that creates the greatest good for the most people.
Mm-hmm.
And that green circle that you were showing, I'm thinking, many of the countries that I lived, the people share the same skin hue as I, but they were uniquely different because all Africans belong to their own tribe.
Sure.
So I remember living in Kenya, I was Mzungu, which refers to outsiders. So I'm an outsider to whites, I'm an outsider to other blacks. And I say, okay, for me, it was always about how can I develop or at least position what I call a gain-gain perspective, because win-win doesn't always get it, right? If my win is bigger than your win, you're going to feel dissatisfied or you're going to feel cheated. So my perspective is we may not come to the situation from the same perspective of equity, but if we can both gain something from the moment, then we can leave satisfied.
Mhm.
I have great difficulty trying to do that since I came to the United States because everything is just all or nothing.
Ah, mhm. More of a
Does that make
competitive,
sense?
yeah,
Yeah, or
more
competitive.
competitive than cooperative.
Yeah, I really like that concept, Brian, of gain. It is different. It's a different mindset, and we do have that culture of win-lose, which is totally personified by our current president. I mean, it's the
Mm,
total culture, but we do have that ingrained in our value system in the United States that
yeah,
not all countries do.
no, nope. Yeah, we've worked in a lot of countries where consensus is the rule. And so, they might look about what's going on with us and just go like, how did that just doesn't resonate at all. But let's get into a little bit about the how, because I think there are going to be some opportunities in the next few days where this is going to be important. And no, we're not going to finish this until our call on Thursday, but nevertheless, we need to start recognizing this. So how do you go about mending those fences? How do you go about healing those relationships? Well, I think we have to start with a cardinal rule, and that is whatever you do, don't make matters worse. So that means that you have to make sure you are at a certain level of productive tension as you even enter this dialogue. So let's say there's someone that you want to heal with. Well, you got to make sure that you know about what's going on with your own levels of tension, and you need to be able to keep yourself at the right level of tension. So if you are up in stress or down in apathy, are you ready to have these discussions?
No.
No. So we have to make sure that you are in power. More specifically, where on the change grid would I want you to be coming from to have these discussions?
From
Because
the center.
from the center, or at least inside of the first degree, inside of the green circle would be sweet. Sweet, 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 because that tells me that you have enough flexibility to move out there into that second degree area where the work can actually be done. So there's that. And then you also have to be able to pay attention to where the other individual's level of tension is. You might be in power, but what if they're up in stress? Well, you don't want to make matters worse. So you certainly don't want to join them up in the stress. You don't want to get pulled in to whatever that upgrid or outgrid sort of dialogue happens to be. You got to be ready to keep yourself in a very useful, clear place. And similarly, you have to recognize when they're not there, and you have to put your energy into moving them more towards this center, because if you don't do that, someone is always influencing somebody. So if you're not influencing them to become more centered, what are they influencing you to do?
Mm.
And that's move off center, whatever direction it happens to be towards. Don't think that they can just awaken your outgrid and upgrid energy. They could also be moving you downgrid. So we can talk about that later. We don't need to worry about that. It's all fine. Just it's all water under the bridge. And part of you might be going like, okay, if I take that at face value, there's no problem. But how many of you kind of go like, nah, we still need to talk about a few things. We need to clear the air. We need to rebuild, whatever. So just be careful that you don't ever forget that somebody is always managing somebody else's level of tension. So if you're not managing yours, then the world is managing it for you. Okay, so that's it. Separating the person from their behavior. We talk a lot about this in any kind of conflict work. This always comes up. We just say like the person and their behavior are different things. And if we are just going to simply define that person as their behavior or in terms of their behavior, and we're going to believe that they are nothing beyond that behavior, do you think this is a really workable situation?
No.
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 And so we got to recognize that the person is different than what this subset of their total life behaviors might be representing this moment in time. So we'll talk about a little bit more on that, by the way, because on Thursday, what we need to do is extract an activity list. I'll go ahead and just give you the big glimpse and the little aha, and then we'll get more into this. But we had the developers add a feature to the website that has now been fully tested and is fully operational. And that is, you can create a change grid. And when the person responds to that change grid, you can have the system automatically send them their results instantly. And so that means they don't have to wait to get it from you and on. They will get their results. Now, the reason why we did that is because it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for us to engage people, to give them a change grid experience. And that involves creating high-end video interpretations of it. And we're going to be putting them up on YouTube for everyone to get to. And so how this is all going to work is it's kind of like the new oracle of the self. Since we can't get physically together, we have to have a way to do this electronically. And so we're putting together a ChangeWorks profile. We will be distributing that link far and wide, and we will invite people to fill out the change grid. They will immediately receive their results, and then there will be a series of YouTube videos they can watch that will give them a high-level reading of what their grid says to them. Well, the first one we wanted to do is about this whole healing the relationships sort of a thing. We thought it was timely. We thought it would be very useful for everyone. So we want to do one on healing relationships. At first, we wanted that profile to be sent out tomorrow, but after having discussions with some of you, I realized realize that I was not paying attention, tomorrow is too soon to send it, because people's levels of tension are going to be very upgrid about other things, about the results themselves, and that might be continuing for several days. So if we send the profile out too soon, it might get ignored completely. It might get buried under a whole lot of other emails. It might get buried under a whole lot of other posts. So we're trying to figure out when is the right time to announce and distribute this link, and announce this whole ChangeWorks global coaching, Oracle itself global coaching sort of an opportunity. And I think the answer is we don't want to do it in the next few days. It's just too soon. Do you guys agree it's just too soon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to allow the dust to settle, the whatever. But I do think that certainly by the weekend, we want to start to get this out. So point is, we need to come up with what is the right activity list. And also, I want to let all you guys know that while we want this to be something that's very engaging for the public and gives people a way to learn about themselves and the change grid, all those Oracle intentions we'd put together, it is an opportunity for you guys to be showcased. So for those of you that are licensed and all that, we'd like to include you in those videos where we're doing these debriefs. Or if you want to put together your own ChangeWorks profile and distribute it, I'm more than happy to help you on your videos to get them all done. So that's what we'll be talking about in the long run. How do we use this new feature to help people have ChangeWorks experiences and to help you to bring your services to the awareness of others? But it's always going to boil down to one thing, and that is we need an activity list. And so as we work our way through this little outline in the time that we have remaining today, I want you to kind of know that that's what we're looking for right now. What are these activities? So are there some mission critical activities when it comes to things like don't make matters worse? Pay attention to your own level of tension. Now, again, the consumer would not understand, so we'd have to translate that into something, separating the person from their behavior. Are there some activities here that we might want to put onto a master list? And then ultimately, what activities are going to arise as the best 8 or 9 or whatever number that we'd like to include at this big kind of Oracle exploration to kind of change grid. Now, this next little part, so as we're doing through this, just kind of keep that in the back of your head. This next little part is one that I think is really, really important for us to focus on for this, and that is seeking to understand before you seek to be understood. If we want to be healing these wounds, we want to be bridging these gaps, again, whatever metaphor you want to use, we have to start by applying a lot of the insights that have been gained from other conflict resolution programs that have been developed and presented for many, many, many years. The only thing that's changed is the context of whatever this current situation happens to be. But the methods that we have for helping people to heal wounds, to bridge gaps, etc., these are not unique in this moment. These are things that have been around for a good long while. We just need to be ready to apply the ones that are most readily applicable in this. But one very big one, I forget whose quote this is, but we must seek to understand before we seek to be understood.
That's Stephen Covey.
Stephen Covey. Okay, fine. And did he originate that, or was this?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Original downgrade maneuver.
this is it. We must seek to understand before we seek to be understood. And that means we have to become really good and comfortable with asking the kinds of questions that will help us to reach for that understanding. Well, one of the most important things that will help us understand the other person is to know what the value equation really is. And this is going to get back to the change grid. I want you to understand, we'll use this layer for a second, that even if I just went and looked at these 8 different roles that someone can serve, they each have their own value equation. So that leader energy values things in a different way than the thinker might value things. Or how about if I just do this? Let's go to the energies for a second. So drivers hold things in value positions that are different than the people who are expressive, or the people that are amiable, or the people that are analytical. I have to understand that whatever decision they've made, whatever action they've taken, whatever beliefs they hold, get back to their values. And so one of the things that I think is very interesting about trying to understand why people choose whatever candidate they choose, and there've been a lot of articles written and published about this recently, it all goes back to this idea about values. There are some voters who are absolutely 100% focused on a single issue, and whichever candidate best matches their position on that issue is the one who gets their vote. None of the other issues matter. No matter what other arguments you want to put forward, none of it matters, because there are people out there who are total single issue deciders. Now, because they make a decision that might be different than the decision we would make, I want to make sure that we don't want to lump them in the category of being un-American, stupid, uneducated. No, they simply have a different value system. And inside of their value system, what they're doing for them is very intelligent, very logical, very American, very whatever they attach to that. So not all people who vote a particular way are in agreement on every aspect that led them to that decision. They may be very different in what their rationale was, what their system was in coming to whatever decision they came to and whatever action they decided to take. Are we all on board with this? You guys are free to unmute and chime in as we go through any of all this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And T, the thing that I wanted to comment on here, because this is something we do with cross-cultural coaching all the time, that probably the major tenet is avoid judgments.
Mm-hmm.
Judgments and value judgments, essentially. And that's a lot of what you're talking about. Know your value equation, know their value equation, and then avoid judgments, because that's the thing that or however we want to say, avoid judging others.
Yeah,
for
exactly right. Right. Because I think that in the act of judging, what I'm trying to do is project my value system onto somebody else, and they don't match. And so I have to judge them harshly or whatever, and just kind of like, no. I want to understand what their values are that led them to make their decision, because we may very well find out that if we held that exact same value equation, we would have done the exact same thing.
Right.
And that to me is where we really get this awareness. What do people prioritize? What are their values? And so just to do this rather quickly, we only have a few minutes, but I'd like to really get into this discussion about values. And then once we understand the values, the next thing we do is this idea about finding common ground. And once we find common ground, we can begin to build again. But I have to find common ground through this understanding of what values are. So for example, people who tend to be more outgrid, tend to have a lot more of the driver energies around them, are going to hold certain issues of greater value than others might. So what do drivers want?
Control.
They want more control. What else do they want?
They want results.
They want results. They want, and one of the models we used, well, they want gain. They're trying to go somewhere. They're trying to grow. They're trying to be better than they are. And so when it comes to gain, that's about an outgrid kind of thing in terms of gaining something, in terms of power, in terms of wealth, in terms of whatever. Well, if I happen to be driven more by those, I shouldn't use that word, but influenced more by those sorts of values, well, some of the things I might be using to judge candidates is about performance, about success in the past, about what happened to economic growth or whatever that case may be. So whatever it is I'm trying to control, I'm trying to gain, I'm trying to grow, whatever that ends up manifesting itself into, that's going to match my values. Those are kind of driver values. Well, if I can understand that this particular individual kind of lives there more, that's where their values really are, well, that helps me to better understand and appreciate where they're coming from. Because if I was going to make a decision based solely on whatever those values happen to be, I may very well have made the exact same decision. But just because their values, they would frame their values as being logical, their values as being intelligent, their values as being American, does not mean that those are the only values that are that meet those requirements, that are intelligent and logical and all American or whatever the case. I hate it above all other things. I hate it when someone questions someone's patriotism because they view a certain thing in a different value. I think that's really just sad all the way across. But that's my value being expressed. So you get that idea. So we have to do that. Now, what is the analytical value? What does the
Data.
Facts.
They value the facts. So there's no one on the change grid who has a deeper appreciation for the truth, and not just the truth as spoken, but the truth as provable than the analytical does. So they're all about the scorecard. So it's either true or it is not true. It can be somewhere in the exploration level, but we want to know what's true. What is truly a fact? And not only is it a fact, but how are those facts being used in building logical cases? So a fact can be a fact, or a fact is a fact by fact. That's in fact the fact. Facts are facts. But how you choose to incorporate that fact into a particular argument or into a particular debate could render that fact inappropriate for whatever is going on. So it's not only the facts, but how are those facts being utilized in coming to whatever conclusion comes in there. So the whole idea about a scientific element, less of an emotion driving it. That's what's happening there with that analytical. So can you guys kind of feel that what the analytical energy values could be very different than what the driver energy values?
Yeah.
Pete,
Yes.
I have a question. What about these people who believe in alternative facts,
Mhm.
as the term coined by Kellyanne Conway, I think? But you know, the QAnon conspiracy theories, and
Sure.
especially because they have created this whole web of
Mhm.
alternative facts that they then go and justify and, you know, find all of these clues through interpretation, you know, various interpretations and things like that. So
Yes.
can they be analytical?
Well, I think now you're looking, and if we had more time, I would throw this to you guys as a quiz question, but right now I'm just going to answer the question. I think that what you were looking at is both an analytical and an expressive energy happening.
Hmm.
Now, maybe they're more expressive, and they're just, you know, the thing about an expressive energy, it values movement, emotional engagement, involvement, that sort of a thing. It's like more action for action's sake, and so they're about the enthusiasm. They're all about that kind of thing, and they're more swayed by things like appearance, by, you know, we'll talk about that in detail on Thursday, but their values are very different than the other values. But if you take someone who's an expressive and you give them just enough analytical stuff, and by the way, because they're primarily an expressive, are they testing the validity of whatever those, are they just accepting them as truths because someone said they were? So they might be using a lot of those alternative realities, a lot of those truths in quotation marks. That's that. Where an expressive analytical might actually say, oh no, there's enough of a foundation here. In fact, that now I'm getting energized. I'm getting that expressive element is coming into play. So I think what's happening there is that you've got both of those energies that are coming in to play, and maybe even add a little bit of driver to that, because someone's going to become the spokesperson and get noisy about the whole thing. So that's that driver energy might be coming into play as well. Okay, and then, just to finish it off, and we can be done for at least today. The amiable energy has a very different value set. So what do you think? Give me some ideas. What do you think the amiable energy values?
Get along.
That people are getting along with one another. What else might they
Go
get
along to
along?
go along, go along to get along.
They go along to get along, etc. Now, again, their values may be very different than any other area on the change grid's values, but I know that inside of their value equation, there is logic, there is intelligence, there is patriotism, there is a heart that's coming into play. So it might be different, but that doesn't invalidate it. And I think it's a very important thing for, as we go about working with others or trying to create stronger relationships, and not just in the current situation, but in all those yet to come, that we appreciate that people operate from their values. And we can talk about where they got those values from and on and on. But the point is, we all have our own set of values. And so I don't mind sharing with you guys that for me, I hold nothing greater in my value equation than character. Now, I think that makes me kind of like an amiable. I'm not sure, because by and large, I would not describe myself as an amiable kind of a person. I really think I'm more of an analytical type, but and maybe when I think about how I go about determining character, there's a strong analytical element involved in that. I don't know, but I would just say to you that I am in no way influenced by what anybody accomplishes or failed to accomplish or anything like that. I am only interested in character. And I'll close by sharing with you one little story that I shared with Joseph earlier. And you guys have probably heard this story before. It's told by a lot of motivational sorts of speakers, but here's the story in a nutshell. I won't even do the amount of embellishment a good storyteller should include, but here's the essence of it. You got a minister. The minister is trying to get ready for Sunday sermon, but they're stuck. They're having a bit of a creative block. But they got to come up with something. Well, at the same time, the minister's wife is out running errands. Their toddler kid is being fussy because it's a rainy day, blah, blah, blah. So the kid is very much distracting the minister from doing it. And so the minister gets to this point where he just grabs a magazine, sees a picture of a globe of the world, rips it all out, tears it into a bunch of little pieces, and says, here's a puzzle, put this together, thinking that's going to buy him some time. Well, the kid comes back within a few moments and says, okay, I'm done. And the father says, the minister says, how were we able to do that? And he said, well, I noticed on the other side of the paper was a picture of a man. And so I figured if I got the man right, the world would be right too. So
Wow.
good story, huh? Yeah. You can see how a lot of motivational people might want to incorporate. Great little story. But that to me is something that I've always kind of thought like, if I can get the person right, if I can if that character is what the character should, can be the best character that we can find in a person, I don't really need to worry about what happens as a
Yeah.
result of that, because the character is going to end up driving whatever happens next. So I don't know where that puts me on the grid. I don't think that's particularly expressive. I don't think that's particularly driven. So amiable, analytical, I don't know, but that would be my value. And so when people find out that I make my decisions based on that as the ruling value, the key value that I hold, they might wonder, why did I do whatever it is that I might choose to do? But if they went for a moment like, oh no, inside of your value equation, that would make sense.
Yeah.
So
T,
you guys,
I have the same value equation. And when I did the social styles, assessment many years ago, I came out as an amiable driver.
mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that helps at all, or if
Yeah,
that's,
I don't know, but I just know that I'm not at any kind of an extreme. I just know that the character. So I went like, okay, well, which of these four main quadrants would probably resonate more with character And I thought, well, that's probably more of an amiable quality because the amiable energy tends to be more person oriented, more human oriented, more. And so that's where it kind of felt like it went, but I went like, I'm not an amiable.
Mhm.
Maybe I am. I don't know. Maybe I'm all these things. Depends on the situation. Okay. Anywho, so with that, I guess we'll end for today. We will pick up with this on Thursday because our goal is to create an activity list that we could share with the general public and say, when it comes to healing relationships, how ready are you to do this? And so fill out the change grid, and then in these video interpretations, we'll be able to help them understand how ready they are. And so again, using it as a bit of the oracle of the self. So you guys with me on kind of what the overall objective is
Yes.
Thank
for
you.
all this? Yeah, but we need that activity list, and it can't be a big one. It's got to be something that's only, 8 or 9 activities, but we might need to put together a list of a couple of dozen, and then let it whittle down to the ones that we think would be most useful, most approachable by the group we would be.
Hey, T, can I ask just one quick technical question?
Yeah.
When you send out the results, is the whole change grid with all the layers going to be included, or just the first?
Yeah, this was something that I talked to the developers about. I wanted all layers to be included.
Okay.
Now, my reason for that is because I want to make sure that when someone, they're not trained, they haven't paid anybody any money or anything like that. I want to make sure that I'm giving them something of great value without giving everything away. And so I want them to see that while they may understand the levels of tension, that there's all these other layers that we're not going to be talking about on these high level overviews. I want them to understand there's a lot more substance, a lot more meat. And so if I only included one layer of the change grid, they might think like that's it. Like if I only ever show anyone the 5 levels of tension, they might think that there's nothing to the change grid but 5 levels of tension. And all of you are probably going like, there's so, that's the least of what the change grid might actually answer. But it's where we have to begin. And so no, they get the full report. You can decide whether or not you want to include a quick reference guide with them. That's part of your choice when you set up the profile. And we did talk to the developers about allowing you to choose which layers to include. And I said, you know what? I think that kind of defeats what our purpose is in the Oracle itself. The Oracle itself is about creating awareness that leads to engagement. And so I have to make sure that there's enough mystery there for that engagement to happen. Okay, other thoughts, questions?
This has been really good.
Yeah.
I'm glad. Okay, all right, well, everyone, we will chat again on Thursday. I just have to change my own calendar so I remember it's not at 9 o'clock for me, it's at 10 o'clock for me, but it's at noon for the East Coast and 9 a.m. for the West Coast. Okay, thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.